Welcome into Campo and Joe. Great to be with you, especially all of Duval. Joe C. from XL Primetime, my man. Dave Campo, former head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, longtime assistant in the National Football League and the college game, including right here in Duval. And, Coach, we're counting it down, okay? This is Tuesday, 2 weeks out.
2 weeks, 2 days, right?
2 weeks to go.
Wow.
And that means people got to start zeroing in on their draft choices.
Yeah.
Will you show them the note cards? You have just hold up that one right there. Okay, the man has got twice as many note cards leading up to the draft this week. And I'm guessing maybe more next week as you get closer to finally filling out this draft.
Well, I'm such an old timer.
Yeah,
I don't have a computer.
Yeah, well, there's no problem with that. But the Graham Cam coming in, Spielberg making sure that people get to see all the hard work the coach puts in, which is just awesome. All right, now that's what it's all about, is trying to give your team as many possibilities when it comes to the draft. Now, all those paper and draft choices that you've created, that's about as many possibilities with the number one overall pick right now. Doesn't it seem that way?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of rankings, you know, where guys sit and how far down you can go before you get out of the first round grade type of a situation. And, you know, it's just gives me an idea of what's happening.
Well, I love it. Before we get to, like, Mel Kiper, for example, put out another mock, 2-round mock where you can get to where he had number 24 overall, where he has the Jaguars going. But then, you know, just to give folks an idea of what that is all about, the analysis that you personally go through to try and zero in on where you think prospects should rank.
Well, first of all, you know, there are 100 mock drafts. So you try to, you know, kind of see where guys are at and get an idea of where they kind of fit. For example, the 24th pick, you may have 10 mocks and 7 of them might have the same guy there. So you got to figure that there's a chance that they might go in that direction. But what I try to do is I watch as much YouTube as I can on the guys that I kind of fit into a group of 4 or 5 guys that might be available at that time and you know, kind of get my own opinion on it. But it's just like anything else. You've heard me say 100 times, the scouts see tons and tons of film. I'm watching 2 games maybe, you know. So what I say is take it with a grain of salt because, you know, I'm not getting the same look as the scouts are.
And then even go beyond that. The scouts do all that work. You watch 2 games, which is every bit of the tape for those 2 games, which means it's good and bad. Other people, maybe even me, throw on the YouTube and all you see are highlights.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then maybe you make a judgment or a determination on a guy with just highlights. I'm watching Miles Murphy from Clemson earlier. I looked at you. I'm like, Coach, this guy's a ball player. Well, every good play is every good play. And there wasn't a whole lot of negative tape that you're going to see on a highlight reel. But still, it makes the decision that you have to make very, very tough.
Well, that's why, you know, when they do this last couple of weeks, they've been going through every player in a draft by position, and they've had the position players in, the position coaches in with the guys that are making the decisions, with the coordinators, all that. A defensive coach's grade, he puts a grade on those guys. Let's say it's a DB. I'm putting a grade on the DB. I'm putting a grade on the DB with 3 tapes. The scouts have watched his junior tape, his senior tape, watched him in workouts, you know, so it can't just be the defensive back coach making a decision on a guy. It's got to be a compilation of all the different people that have seen him, and that's what goes on up on that draft board. It comes down to you've got all these grades put together, and then the decision makers make the final, here's where we're putting them, right here. And that's what is going on right now over there.
All right, so we're going to get to the Jags as far as some of the mocks are concerned out there, but let's at least go to the top of the board. Thankfully, Jacksonville's not at the top of the board. Thankfully, after back-to-back years of picking number 1, they have their quarterback. They don't have to worry about it. Still a little bit of a question mark next to Trayvon Walker's name, but thankfully they're picking 24th. So Mel Kiper kicks out his most recent. This is the 4.0. And he flip-flops his top 2 picks. He puts Bryce Young in that number one spot with the Carolina Panthers. And I just want to read one little snippet here. He says, this is Mel, quarterback, Carolina coach Frank Reich trying to make a decision. He said he's worked over with the past decade a lot of different guys with physical molds. He says, I've heard too many rumblings about the front office and coaches liking Young. And my pal Chris Mortensen and Adam Schefter believe Young is the guy as well. So now there's starting to be a consensus with about 2 weeks to go. Do you believe that's when the consensus, maybe when things start to come out of the building, they kind of give you a true picture of what they're going to do?
I think the national guys, they're not going to hit every guy. But the national guys have enough contacts with, nobody's perfect as far as, not letting anything leak.
Right.
There's going to be some leaks, and especially to some sports writers that have a really good relationship. I'm telling you right now, Rick Goslin, who Goose, they call him Goose Goslin, for many years put out the top 100 players. Okay, he doesn't do it anymore, but he did. I could have closed my eyes and made a pick and put my finger on a guy, and it would be pretty close to where the guy was going to be picked.
Yeah,
and it's because he had so many sources around the league. So when you get a national guy starting to hear rumblings, that means that he's talked to somebody and a few other people, and, they have a pretty good idea. And where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah. And, the thought was Frank Reich has worked with big guys. He's coached them well to success. Even Carson Wentz, he had the most success with Carson Wentz as the offensive coordinator up in Philly and when he was the head coach in Indianapolis. But if you're looking at all the intangibles along with the tangibles, Bryce Young, it's still going to be a roll of the dice. He's 5'10", 204 pounds. He in the NFL world, that sounds kind of small,
right?
And he's going to have to roll the dice on that part.
That is a dice roll,
yeah.
And that would be my only concern, because when you look at those two guys, and I've watched those two guys, okay, Stroud has a good upside. Stroud does a lot of good things, okay. But Bryce Young is almost complete. You can see Stroud have some really bad games and some really good games. You see this guy, I think the thing that jumped Stroud up there was against Georgia, when he had the game against Georgia.
Really helped.
Well, that's one game, and I think what you're looking at is the skill set of Bryce Young is almost immaculate as long as he can handle the pressure of the big guys in front of him.
Yeah, that's it. Stroud doesn't have everything, but he has a lot of everything, and that's kind of how you have to look at it. 6'3" versus a 5'10" guy, and that definitely, I think, is going to be a major decision. That's almost a half a foot. Okay, that honestly, that means something. All right, now this is where it gets interesting. Mel Kiper has a projected trade. The Titans jumping up 8 spots. He phrases it, it's a fun deal to think about. Who knows if they'll do it? Who knows if they're moving on from Ryan Tannehill? They've gutted a big portion of their team.
Right.
They may move Derrick Henry when this is all said and done.
Right.
But
to the Cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you never know. Another big guy toting it for them. He's got the Tennessee Titans, via the trade with the Arizona Cardinals, taking Anthony Richardson. And look, I fight this, coach. I love the potential of what I see from Anthony Richardson. But if it doesn't work out, moving up that many spots to get into that number 3, people are going to lose jobs over this.
Well, and you're talking about losing picks in next year's draft.
Yes, not just this one selection.
24's draft,
yes.
25's draft.
Yeah.
That's a big jump to get to number 3. And again, we've talked about Anthony Richardson ad nauseum. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Ad nauseum for sure.
Yeah. But, the quarterback position is one that you're really willing to take a chance on, because, the guys that have picked number 1 over time has been about 50-50 whether or not they turn out or not. And if you've got a guy that's got so many intangible qualities and athletic qualities, that's one that you take a chance on. And I could see that happening. And I could see Arizona making a trade because they're not going to take a quarterback, and they need more than one guy. And that's when you make a pullback to get more draft picks. And so it could be interesting. I'm not sure what to make of Anthony Richardson, but he's one that you could take a chance on for sure.
And it might even be a real rebuild time in Tennessee. Now, let's not forget, they already took one guy that was at least talked about at this time last year as being a first-round draft choice, and Malik Willis. He fell to the third round. They took him. He started a couple games because Tannehill was hurt, and it did not work very well. They ended up sitting him down and going with the third stringer. Who was it? Was it Jared Stidham they put in there? Anyway, they put the third stringer in there. Basically, it almost felt like they were throwing in the towel. Right. Lo and behold, they lost 6 straight. Jacksonville went on their roll, and the rest is history. The division is right here in Duval now. I don't know whether they're tearing up this roster or not. I really don't.
They've certainly made enough moves in other areas to make you think that we're willing to make some gambles now, because we're talking about not next year. I think they're sitting there looking and saying, the Jaguars, they had a pretty good run at the end. They got a quarterback that can, be a difference maker. We need to make sure that we're not worried about next year. We got to worry about going forward, because this is going to be a long haul.
This is Duval's division now.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I had a little brain fart. Jarrett Stidham stepped in out west, when they sat down Derek Carr.
Correct.
It was the other SEC quarterback, Josh Dobbs, that came in and played against Jacksonville and made things interesting.
Played pretty good.
Yeah, at the end. He just scrambled his way to a play here or there before Josh Allen and company made their play.
Right.
All right, real quick, just to finish up this quarterback discussion, Will Levis taken 4th in Mel Kiper's mock 4.0 to the Indianapolis Colts. That would be historic. 4 quarterbacks taken in a row.
Yeah. Now, I could see it happening if they move up, because, again, I think that there are 4 guys that they feel are in the top 10. And, whether you take them 4th or 9th or 8th, doesn't make a difference to me.
Yeah.
I think if they feel like Levis is a potentially, he's a little inconsistent, but potentially he has some of the same traits and qualities. A big quarterback. He can run a little bit. He's got a good arm, strong arm. He's got some of the intangibles, and it may take him a little while, but I think both the Colts and the Titans are in a position to say, we got to stay up with the quarterbacks coming into this league, because it looks like the Texans are going to take a quarterback. So now you got a brand new set of quarterbacks, and they've got to keep pace or else they're in trouble. And I was in a situation where I didn't have a quarterback.
Right.
And if there's one that they think gives them a chance, there's a chance they could make that move.
Yeah, if you reach and you get it right, then it makes all the sense in the world. You can mortgage your future if you get it right. If you don't, you could. I always quote Donovan Darius. I actually kind of paraphrase what he said, but if you make a bad decision at any one position, it can mess you up and set you back for a year or two. You make a bad decision when it comes to the quarterback, it can set you back 3 to 5 years.
And it's been a lot. There's been a lot of them. But, the way I counter that is the fact that if you don't have a quarterback now, you're set back for 4 or 5 years anyway.
Yeah.
Now, they'll look at next year and they'll say what quarterbacks are available. If there isn't a bunch of them over there, you're going to take the file when it's hot. If you're the 4th pick in the draft, you're probably going to take a quarterback if you think he's good enough to go forward.
And think about the run that the Colts had for the longest time, from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck.
Right.
They had hardly any drop-off. As soon as Peyton was gone, they dropped to the bottom of the records for 2012. They go out there, 2011, whatever it was, they go out there and they make Andrew Luck the number 1 overall pick. He takes him right back to the postseason. He ends up cutting his career short. But the combination of Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck was about a decade and a half, if not longer than that. And when you have that, you have something. You really do.
No question. And again, that probably really was a dagger to the heart when Luck,
oh my gosh,
decided to
remember it was
save his hide, I guess.
Yeah, well, he was 29 years old, I'm pretty sure, had a big contract, was willing to give it up and walk away. He wanted to be healthy. You have to give him credit for making that decision and not necessarily regretting it. But then they went after that just kind of chasing a Phillip Rivers, a Carson Wentz, a Matt Ryan. So they've tried to do everything to get back to that level of play. Thankfully, here in Jacksonville, you finally have found a quarterback.
Yeah, that's big, no question.
I gave you the stat earlier, and it really kind of blew my mind. If you get the quarterback position right, you can stay competitive for a long, long time. Green Bay, in 43 of their last 63 seasons, let's just call that 2/3 of their 63 years that they've been playing football in the National Football League, they've had 3 quarterbacks: Bart Starr, Brett Favre, and Aaron Rodgers. And those guys added up to 8 NFL MVPs, 7 NFL championships, and 9 league passing titles.
Yeah.
You get it right, you are good for a long time.
And see, part of that, though, is that when you make that quarterback selection, and this is what we did not do in Dallas, when you have a quarterback, pick one. Because when you get to the point where you don't have a quarterback, that's when we're talking about what's going on with gambling.
Right.
You know, now you're taking chances because you don't have one. If you look at Rodgers, he sat for 2 or 3 years, right?
He sat for 3 years.
Yeah, and yet they were still competitive because they had Favre there. They had something to go forward. The guys that make the mistakes that don't pick quarterbacks when they're there and they have the opportunity to maybe set themselves up for the future. And that's one that you want to set yourself up for the future.
All right, let's get to your Jacksonville Jaguars. And the draft board, as coach has started to lay it out, eliminate guys that he thinks will be taken. We have mentioned a handful of guys. We'll continue to mention a handful of guys. But I just want to give you what Mel Kiper did. Leading up to the 24th pick overall, he has Myles Murphy, defensive end out of Clemson, coming off the board 20th to the Seattle Seahawks. He has Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of Southern Cal, going to the Chargers, 21st. 22nd pick, Deonte Banks. That's another target that Jacksonville has been linked to, the cornerback out of Maryland, gone. Emmanuel Forbes, another cornerback, off the board, going to Minnesota. Then Mel Kiper has Lucas Van Ness, the defensive end out of Iowa, going 24th. What do you think? Well,
I think Lucas Van Ness is a good player. I don't necessarily think he's the best edge rush guy that you can get. I think he's got some ability. He hasn't had a lot of sacks, which, again, that's measurable, I guess. You can look at potential.
Right. 6'5", 272.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that would be my pick. Again, he's talking to a lot of guys. So
he had 7 sacks last season. The thing that I think would frustrate any Jaguar fan, and not saying that they don't need to go back to the well again, but they have drafted 3 of the last 4 drafts very high choices to rush the passer.
Right.
And they have not been successful. They need to fix it. They still need to fix it.
Well, I think rushing the passer is one of the, I would not be surprised at all if they take a guy that they think can help them rush the passer. Because when you look at last year's team, you just lost your 2 second and third sack guys with Smoot and Key.
Yeah.
And they weren't very good. The total wasn't very good to begin with.
Yeah.
So
Dewan Smoot, a really good player, but not a great player. He's a good situational player.
Right. And so they need to do something with the pass rush, that's for sure. And with Josh Allen being in his 5th year, for the future, that position is strong. I'm just not sure he's the right guy.
Yeah, it's a shame that Dewan Smoot had the ruptured Achilles because, he'd average 4 to 5 sacks a year. He'd really come in at crucial times and make plays for you. Arden Key, we know the only reason we're here is because Arden Key was here. Right. Let's get that real.
Yeah, he built the city.
He built this place, just to be perfectly truthful about the whole thing. But anyway, he's gone to Tennessee, and those were guys that didn't add up to a lot of numbers. And I think the thing that's troubling me the most, Coach, is that they have thrown a lot of darts at the defensive side of the football, and this was when they were picking very high in the draft. They've used a number 1 overall pick, a 7th pick, a 20th pick. you can go on and on, trading up to get to the 25th pick last year and getting an outside linebacker and Devin Lloyd, and they just haven't hit the mark.
Well, that's a concern from the standpoint that it's unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the defensive guys, they made a lot more mistakes on than they have the offensive guys.
True.
And so
Etienne's a hit. Lawrence is a hit. You're right.
Little is a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Ingram getting a free agency.
Jawan and Cam
Jawan and Cam both. Fortner is a hit in my opinion. So it troubles you because they don't have that same situation on defense. But I'm going to tell you right now, in order for this team to win, they need to play better defense next year. Yeah. And so, if you're looking at just next year alone, they need to take there's some more holes over there than there is on the offensive side of the ball.
All right. I mean, that's honestly where we're going to land. Now, with Mel's mock, he had a couple of cornerbacks going right in front of Jacksonville. Then he also had another cornerback going after Jacksonville's pick. So as you sit here now, and we're 2 weeks and 2 days from the draft, where are you at with the most pressing need based on the way the board falls? Well, you don't have to go need.
Yeah. Well, to me, if there's a big there, you take the big right now. Because they're hardest to find. If there's a pass rusher that they feel strongly about, then I would take them. If there's an offensive tackle that they feel really strongly about, I think the third tackle or competition for Cam Robinson and Little is very important because you've got to protect the quarterback.
Okay.
And then my third choice would be a corner. And, coming from me, I'm not sure after all the time I spent in the NFL that I know what I'm talking about a corner because C.J. Richardson and
C.J. Henderson.
Henderson, excuse me, and Okudah, has now been traded from Detroit. But I thought they were both good enough to play for about 9 years. It just didn't work out.
I feel like you get a pass, I get a pass in the sense that those were the two top cornerbacks taken. We're going back 3 drafts. We're going back to 19. Is that right? Going back to 19?
Yeah,
is that
19, right?
Yeah, so we're going back 3 drafts, counting this last year. And C.J. Henderson played less than a full season, or basically, about that, before he was dealt to Carolina. Jeff Okudah now moves from the Lions to the Sunshine State. What was it about them? Was it just was it the competition they face in the college game versus the competition they face in the NFL game?
Well, first of all, that could be part of it because we've talked before about the fact that there's 1.5% to 2% of all college players play in the NFL. Big-time professional football.
Yeah.
So when they're playing in college, they're playing against probably 95, 96%, 98% of the guys they're playing against are not going to be pro athletes.
That's a great point.
When they get here, everybody, they're playing against the 1.5% to 2% that are playing in the National Football League. So that's part of it. But also it's a mental... that's why it's so subjective in the draft is the mental aspects of the game. The mentality that's why everybody's a little worried about Jalen Carter. Does he have the makeup that it takes? If you're playing against 1.5% or 2% of the guys, you got to be on your game all the time. It can't be one game you're on, one game you're off. You take 2 or 3 plays off. It can't be that way if you're going to be successful because the guy you're playing against is probably as good as you are at what they're doing.
Yeah, you have to commit to putting in the work, not just the plays, the work that gets you to the plays. And look, we mentioned Okudah and C.J. Henderson. They're not the only guys that are examples of just falling out in favor with their particular team. There are a lot of guys like that, but you cannot miss more often than not in the top 10. Which
Absolutely.
Jacksonville, this is only the second time, Coach, since 2008. That's hard to really put together in your head. This is only the second time since 2008 that this team will be picking outside the top 10.
Well, and to go along with what you're saying, Henderson only played a certain amount of time.
Yeah, basically less than a season.
Okay. And my next door neighbor, I hate to say this because he doesn't really know football, but he's a Florida Gator.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me at that time, he says, I don't know about that Henderson guy because mentally, I don't know that, he's really loves the game of football. So, and of course, all I was looking at was what he did when he was playing.
His man cover skills were exceptional.
Right, exactly. Well, take another situation, Trayvon Walker.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I know about Trayvon Walker is, from everybody, is that he's a hard worker. He cares about it. He loves the game. He cares about it and all those kind of things. Well, when you get a guy like that, you got a chance.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a guy like Henderson or Jalen Carter, maybe, that's the concern, because a lot of it is the approach that you take. I have no doubt that Trayvon Walker is working to be better right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No doubt, from everybody that I've talked to.
I think that's why you always speak of the DNA of a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Just what's he made of? Is he the type of guy? You've heard me say about the Cowboys, Jimmy Johnson, all he ever wanted, and we tried to do the same thing, was to draft smart guys,
mm-hmm.
because smart guys learn,
mm-hmm.
and smart guys can develop.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously Henderson wasn't that kind of a guy.
No, he wasn't committed.
And I believe Trayvon Walker is. Now, I don't know about Jalen Carter because I don't know enough about him, but I know he could be a difference maker if he's 100%.
Yeah, he gets in trouble after the national championship. There was a fatality with them street racing, and then leading up to pro day, it looks like he comes in out of shape, and you can't help but raise the questions in your mind as to whether or not this guy is going to be able to.
Some people take that guy right off the board.
Yeah.
They don't even have him up on the board. He's on a separate board. This is,
and then
he fell to number 56 or something, they might take him.
Yeah, and then other NFL teams say, you're big, you're strong,
we'll
go
fix
get the
you.
quarterback. Yeah. So we'll see. All right, Coach, this is good stuff. 2 days and 2 weeks. We'll see when we zero in on that draft pick where you ultimately go, where we go, and where the Jaguars go. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us, as always. Campo and Joe. Don't forget, we'll be back next week and 1 week closer to the draft.